Alright, it's finally time for the big D&D video. This is kind of a follow-up to the Generation 3 D&D models that I made over half a year ago. However, this will not be like the podcast ones where the party members are talking to me about their characters. Rather, this will be a pure montage where I quickly go from character to character, creating all of them and explaining my process in very short 2 to 3 minute chunks for each one. There will be chapters at the bottom of the video for each character type, so you can skip ahead if you like. Links to all of the models will also be in the description below. Finally, some disclaimers. These are D&D models. I do not have full creative freedom with all of these, and furthermore they are all bound by certain constraints, such as needing to fit into small square tiles and roll 20 from a top-down perspective. Finally, we are a party of 9 people if you include the DM, and there has been a few deaths, hence why in total there's actually 11 models here. At the end of the video I will do some TLDRs about the party and how everybody died. Anyway, without any more intro garbage, let's get to the first character. So let's start fairly simple with a basic pillar of any D&D party, a cleric who heals people. Specifically in Warhammer terms, this is a Priestess of Shalia, Teftra Dryden. She is a fairly new character to the party following the death of the player's former healer, Ellis Rathla, who was a druid. She was part of the Generation 3 batch, but there's no new model for her. I'm afraid she's dead, she's a corpse. Anyway, for this character, you should imagine somewhat of a mix between a typical robed holy priestess and kind of a warrior-esque shield maiden. You know, it's straightforward, but I have faith it will look cool. As you'll notice, we have a pretty clean and straightforward theme to work with here. We have a heraldry of nice white birds, as well as a light blue and silvery color scheme, with occasional tidbits of gold as well, which, you know, it's just... You'll also notice I'm going to wait a while before I double model here. Sometimes I find it to be most effective to try and almost complete the model altogether before you go into advanced layering. That way you kind of know which bits really need the layering and which don't. And yes, flipping shoulders like I did with these two works with a lot of them. It's a great and very simple trick, use it. And of course, double modeling, finally. Now, first thing I'm going to do is try and find a nice hairstyle to layer on top of the old one, but more importantly, we're going to be using it to try and really layer a lot of chain and cloth together to get that kind of battle priestess look down, but we'll get to that later. Here I found a really nice layering combination, as this chest piece allowed me to keep a small scarf around her neck and simultaneously add some really nice gilded decorations around her arms. Again, I don't want this character to look too heavily armored, so this honestly fits perfect. And as per usual, almost any character can be given just a little bit more personality by having some extra horn hair slapped into the mix. It really can never hurt. All in all, I am really happy with this model. It's a very grounded and down-to-earth character concept, and it doesn't necessarily stand out that much, but those are often the models that I personally like the most. You know, it's clean, it's simple, it uses some really nice layering techniques, and that's it, enjoy. You are now about to witness what is perhaps my favorite Heroforge model to date, Hamhunch the Hex Chef. So he is a Halfling Hexblade Warlock and also a chef who is incredibly fat. Now it's a bit of a running gag that for every new generation of D&D Heroforge models, Hamhunch gets a little bit fatter, and since I already used the short chunk glitch for the Generation 3 model last time, I now need to up the ante and somehow make him even more round this time, but rest assured, whenever you're in doubt, there's always tails, okay? There's always tails. So I made a video explaining this short chunk technique in detail if you want to see how it works, but the gist of it is just that you have a glitched legless model with a huge torso combined with another tiny model to act as the feet and the hands of the chunky main body. So just like last time, you can see that I'm using the skin-colored keyring horn twisted under the chin to give him some neck fat, but this time I also wanted to experiment with decal kit bashing to try and give him like hair on that keyring, you know, give him a proper neck beard. You know, I had to, okay, I'm sorry. And boom, here we go. This ugly skin-colored tail is going to be really important here. The keyring itself is not enough neck fat for an upgraded ham hunch, right? We need this guy to be fat, so we are going to twist this tail through his body to give him real neck fat on a whole other level. Just watch me, okay? It's gonna be glorious. And yes, I did color his beanie like Cartman's. Did I mention, by the way, that this character is the fastest member of the group? Like, by D&D terms, he's actually the super speedy Sonic halfling, right? Like, who can actually use magic to fly as well. So, yeah, you can try and imagine this actual lump of a warlock just zooming about in our D&D sessions. It's great. It's honestly great. I think more so than any of the other characters, Ham Hunch's model really exploits extra arms for extra items, you know? Since he's the one making our food and carrying ingredients around, I took the chance to kind of put everything I could on him, you know? An apple, a fish, a barrel, an onion for starters, and I don't generally like to overexploit this trick for unnecessary clutter, but with Ham Hunch, it goes a long way in adding to his sheer mass, you know? And we need all the chunk we can get for this guy. Here we have Adeus, a narcissistic high elf cavalier fighter. He is as obnoxious as you can imagine in D&D, and as you can probably also guess, I absolutely hate making elves. Adeus is also a returning player from earlier on in the campaign, so the last model he had was a Generation 2 Fire Wizard. You know, fortunately though, this time he has given me a few interesting things to work with, mainly the whole high elf warrior concept, which in Warhammer lore has some very interesting looking helmets, so that right there will probably be the focus of this piece. I find elves quite difficult to make in Heroforge, and my trick when I know I have a difficult model ahead of me is generally to try and do as much as possible before I start double modeling, and that is why this model more or less looks complete before I even start layering. And yeah, I mean, we all love spending 20 minutes posing shoulder pads, right? Yeah. Now we get to that helmet I was talking about, so we're going to use everything to our disposal here. Horns from both the main and the extra models, as well as 2 stacked helmets and a lot of feathers. He's gonna look like a damn dragon knight, okay? Although I've always hated doing elves, this one has probably been my all-time favorite thus far. And look, the truth is, most elf players just want to be the 207th rendition of Legolas, so they all have a boring, plain-shaved face with absolutely no detail. And this character is the same, by the way. But that is why an elf like this, where I not only get to hide that boring face, but also replace it with a huge, awesome helmet, is basically just perfect for me, right? It's the best thing I could have gotten. Anya the Ice Witch, played by my girlfriend Saf, who also does some great art. And speaking of, that art is what this character's appearance is based off of. And as you can see, we're going for somewhat of a clean mix between your typical Viking barbarian lady and then also kind of a brutal ice sorceress. So yes, it's an awesome concept, let's do it. Now, you'll see that I double model very early on here, and that is because this model needs to look very muscular, right? Which in Heroforge will mess up a lot of clothing pieces. Therefore, the extra model is kind of there to stay skinny and to keep the clothes looking normal around all the muscle, as well as a lot of layered clothing, you know. One thing I struggle a bit with in regards to Anya is kind of the complete lack of colors, right? Like, obviously there's brown and grey and a little bit of faded blue, but like you know me, I like to have at least one color that pops, but at the same time though, like I suppose the cold aesthetic really also kind of sells the character concept well, so, like it makes sense in its own way, you know? Since Anya is meant to look very northern, I also experimented here with using decal kit bashing and a faded red skin color to make kind of a custom blush, and as a Swedish person I can confirm this actually looks pretty realistic. All in all, as far as Russian characters go, I think Anya turned out better than most of them. Yeah, I'm really funny, okay, laugh please. So, Saral de Maurienne, mustachioed knight-errant of Bretonia, basically France, and main character of the D&D party. So this character is very interesting from a D&D perspective, although perhaps a bit less so from a Heroforge perspective, if that makes any sense. With this character, I have virtually zero creative freedom, and worse yet, the player himself has basically zero creative freedom as well. Saral is stacked with magical items as well as armor, which was all given to him through very specific storylines in the campaign itself, which means they have to look a certain way. His shield looks dumb and Welsh, his armor is all black despite being a lawful good paladin, and yeah, suffice to say he is hard to make look cool, but I am up to the challenge. So, the reason all of his armor is black is because Saral took up this plated suit after his comrade in arms, my old character Gunnar, a fighter, died in battle, so it can't really change color. The glowing amulet, the Welsh shield, the pure white cloak and the black suit of armor are all things that I cannot change, so you can imagine my pain. On the bright side, I do get to do one of my absolute favorite layering combinations here with the Knight Banneret tunic, black art chest piece and the half-plate cuirass. I wanted to try and experiment with like a cooler custom helmet here, which is why I'm swapping things around a lot, but you know, eventually we kind of decided that we would leave that for when the character eventually finds new armor, which, you know, hopefully happens sooner rather than later, hopefully before the next patch. And of course, since I had some spare decal kit bashings, I'm going to throw down some extra claw marks over his armor. You know, there's always something you can add with the extra decals. I will say, as difficult as it is to make Saral look cool with all of his limitations, I also do have a certain attachment to this character since this is now the 4th version that I make of him and I get to upgrade him just a little bit each time, you know? He's been the main staple of the party since day one, and you know, considering how crazy OP he is, as all paladins are, you know, I doubt that he's going anywhere anytime soon. Rock the Garagefoot Gundadrak, because every good D&D party needs a dwarf. And yeah, I mean, for this model I do use a lot of the fairly standard and simple dwarf tricks, like lowering the height but simultaneously raising the upper scale of the body to give him a stumpy, a top-heavy look. Overall with this model, I'm just kind of going for a mix between your kind of average dwarven dual-wielding fighter with hammers, axes and horned helmets, as well as, you know, the typical Paladin-esque Dwarf Ranger at the same time. One of the centerpieces of this model really is this huge, custom dwarf beard, which includes a lot of hair-colored horns stretched down into a big old beard. Once we're using 2 models and have a lot more horns to work with, it will really start to look great, believe me. Dwarf models actually follow some similar principles as a lot of the monster race models do some of these tricks I mentioned in my Lizardman video. And they do that in the sense that it's really good to use these kind of poses which show them hunched over and with their legs bent downwards. It really helps to convey a less straight and tall humanoid look. One of the most iconic dwarf things from Warhammer, it kinda is this triple mountain triangle insignia, and while I can't replicate it completely, I can give it a pretty damn good try with these 3 triangle decal kit bashings. But of course, those mountain decals were all on 1 model. The other 3 I got are reserved for the weapons, so we can have more runes. But anyway, overall, I'm a huge fan of this model. Like I don't often make dwarves, so it probably doesn't mean that much. But Brock is definitely my favorite dwarf model to date, as far as my own models go. This here is Varan Crowman, School of Necromancy Wizard, and arguably the only character who could actually match Sir Raoul in levels of OP. Whenever we get in trouble in D&D, it's usually either Raoul being unkillable or Varan summoning an army of zombies that tends to save us in the end. And better yet, this time around, I actually get to make something interesting with this character. His first generation 3 model was quite boring and blank if I'm being completely honest, but since then the character has upgraded to more of a traditional vampiric look, so now I basically get to do a little mini Dracula for him. The real centerpiece of this model will be this vampiric Sylvanian banner on his chest here. It's not really the easiest thing to duplicate from the source material into Heroforge, but it at least gives me something to work with and focus attention to. This cloak, of course, is also a huge part of the character, and this is where I can use Varan's love for excessive black to my advantage by just, clipping all of these dark wings and cloaks and shoulders together for a huge Dracula-esque coat. We'll of course be adding tails to make a big color for it as well later. I also went a bit rogue here with the book decals. Again, with Varan's player, you kinda have to force him to allow a bit of color in, and I mean, you guys know what I think of monocolor edgelords. Although Varan is also quite restrictive to make, this is actually one of my favorite models from the Generation 4 batch. I don't know, I think there's something quite iconic about the overall silhouette and the vibe of this model, but it could also just be my own bias for dark Transylvanian fantasy, who knows. So this is Carlos, my own character, an assassination rogue built solely around sniping people at a long distance. The entire point of this character was basically just to do big bursts of damage in single shots, and it was useless. Like, seriously, it was so bad. I barely did more damage than most other people, and I had very, very little use past that point. I would not recommend. The concept itself was fun though, and as far as models go, this is one of my favorites. You will see why. I'll admit, since this was my own character, I went for something quite simple and low fantasy. Like, I have always been a huge fan of this kind of classic dark Renaissance fantasy fashion, and with that, you know, using very muted dark colors, say for a single area which is meant to stand out, and that of course is that little splash of blood red near his collar, you know, that's really the centerpiece. I also used a lot of extra arms to add small bits of details to this character, such as these vials, which I colored like extra bullet ammunition, or the hairbrush that I'll later use to accentuate this black jacket's shoulder pad as well. Then of course the pièce de résistance of the Carl piece is just this beard, right? It basically consists of 8 individual wispy antenna horns from both models being angled downwards and into his chin. It's a great trick if you want to make more squared looking, like, thin beards for Heroforge characters. I mean, Carl just looks awesome, doesn't he? I have no further comment. My own characters always look fantastic, you know, full creative freedom, alright? Sir Otto, an absolute gigachad Imperial Wandering Knight, though technically a Hunter Conclave Ranger if we're talking D&D terms. This is Josh's new character after Varan Crowman was unfortunately axed, real tragedy honestly, but Otto is pretty cool too. You can imagine a pretty standard longsword knight mixed with, you know, like a woodland nomad basically for this character. In all honesty, there is nothing overly complicated going on here, but you know, frankly, screw the redditors who think that you need to use 50 glitches and 500 tails to make a model be cool. You know, sometimes simple is better, less is more, that's just how it is. I will confess, I was a bit confused when making this model because I was initially under the impression that I was making like a fancy gilded knight of Myrmidia, but then it was decided instead that it was more of like a homeless nomad knight, so that's why it kinda shifts vibe halfway through. I just want it to be said, these green and brown colors here at the end were not my call. The player wanted that. Don't blame me, I swear. Erembor, an Elven Ranger. Spoiler alert, Adeus immediately died. It was really gruesome and satisfying to watch, but you know, I was also kind of pissed because I worked pretty hard on that helmet for that model. But anyway, I am back to making another elf for the same player, with another boring plain face and armor which is near impossible to replicate well in Heroforge. But anyway, I gotta try, so you know, here we go. Also, this bastard tried to copy what I did with Carl and made a rogue that's completely focused on sniping people at a long distance, only with a bow instead of a gun. I mean, how nerdy is that? Like, who in the world thinks that bows are cooler than guns? Sorry, I'm starting to sound a little bit American now. Anyway, back to the model. All in all, this is definitely not one of my favorites of this batch, but like this model had a lot of difficult constraints. You know, maybe with a future rendition of this character, after he gets some new, like, cooler looking gear in D&D, he'll look better. But you know, whatever. We'll see. Time will tell. So, for this final model, Gunnar Reborn. I am sorry to say that I have no recording of creating this character. I never figured that it would turn out as good as it did, but like, alas, I will still show it, but rather than sitting here and boring you with a long dissection, I'm going to quickly give a little bit of context to all of this, as well as why Gunnar is here, considering he died, you know. At the time of the last video, the Generation 3 batch, the party was this. Gunnar died and was replaced by Carl. Those are both my characters. Sir Raul, of course, immediately stole Gunnar's armor, hence why Sir Raul has 2 different Generation 3 models and why I made a little video updating him a while back. But if none of the other dead Generation 3 characters has a Generation 4 model, then why does Gunnar? Because Gunnar is back! Well, okay, kinda. So anyway, look, Carl went rogue and tried to kill a bunch of priests of Moor because they kind of refused to help us against the undead cult. Anyway, honestly, take my word for it, he was completely justified. But anyway, Sir Raul kind of kicked Carl out of the party, so I didn't have anyone to play. Anyway, Gunnar was resurrected by a devout warrior priest of Sigmar. Look, this was not completely pulled out of our ass, I promise. There's actually precedence for this. But anyway, now he is not a fighter, but he is a Path of the Zealot Barbarian in service of Sigmar, and that is why he's now called Gunnar the Undying, because anyone who's played Path of the Zealot Barbarian knows that this class just cannot be killed, right? And anyway, yes, that is my replacement for Carl as a character. Yes, I replaced Carl with an even older character of mine. Look. So, to make the actual dissection very brief, I've used a lot of the same techniques here that I used for the Goblin Swordsmaster in my rework video, just on a human instead, you know? You can see the usual kind of layering trick I've done here with the biker jacket and like coloring these like an undershirt, and then these little skeleton, you know, Sigmarite skulls here, as well as Sigmarite hammer and the fish that's meant to look like the burning comet, you know, the decals. It's fun. Obviously, I have a very deep saturated blood red tabard here, using a kind of metallic red but with high roughness to still look like cloth. And of course, this hammer in D&D terms is actually a flame tongue maul, so you know, it's that's why it's kind of glowing like this, and obviously there's a bit of hammer stacking going on here as well. Purity scroll! And of course, I gave him the Carl beard treatment. Yes, I know I'm a little bit basic with my character preferences, okay? But look, I can't grow a proper beard like this IRL, so if I can't be an awesome Swedish bearded Viking, then I'm gonna play an awesome bearded Swedish Viking, okay? That's just how it is. So, the party starts off in the innocent little town of Vardanos. Back then, they were a humble little bunch, okay? Regthor the Rune Priest, Didi the Goblin Bard, Gunnar the Adventurer, Soral the Knight Errant, Hamhunch the Hex Chef, and Ellis Rathla the Druid. That was the party back then. Then, of course, by the time of Generation 2, when the party had left Vardanos and they were on their way to the infamous city of Karlsbrook, where everything's gonna go wrong, they were joined by Ubrig Leadpelt the Dwarf Slayer and the Tallinn Luminsant the Fire Mage. Now, Karlsbrook was a huge imperial city infested by a plague of undeath, and neither Ubrig nor Tallinn lasted very long, I'm afraid. Anyway, the party was instead joined by the infamous Varen Crowman by the time the Generation 3 models were made. And then, of course, very shortly after that, the real massacre starts. So Bregthor is arrested by the guards and suffers death by firing squad. He is replaced by Casimir. Gunnar falls in battle against a Minotaur. He is replaced by Karl. Ellis Rathla is strangled to death by accomplices of the cult. She is replaced by Teftria. And Didi's soul is consumed by a Nightwalker, and she is replaced by Anya. Then, of course, you know, almost immediately after Casimir dies again, he dies horribly, and he doesn't get replaced until Generation 4. He gets a placeholder Bregthor for the time being, you know, that's Brock, but for now, just it doesn't have a model, okay? By the time of the Generation 4 models, the party has been more stable for some time. It now consists of a core of Soral as the party's leader, Hamhunch as the only other truly old member of the party next to him, Varen, of course, by now has established himself as a bit of an advisor to Soral. Nobody likes Karl, but Karl is there. Anya's here, and she's constantly friendly firing everyone with her ice tornadoes. Teftria heals people. Brock joins the party. He's a dwarf. Well, actually, he joined the party before, but now he has a model. That's great. Deus also joins the party. People dislike him even more than they dislike Karl. Oh, and we completely fail in Karlsbrook. Like, the bad guys win altogether. I mean, it's kind of to be expected after most of us died in the process, but yeah, you know, if you think you have a DM who never lets you lose, believe me, we don't. Then, of course, things quickly change again. We enter Mordheim, a very cursed and evil city. For any of the Warhammer nerds out there, they'll know. So yeah, everything goes terrible and people start dropping in. Karl has already gone mental and has been exiled before then. He's replaced by Gunnar. Of course, Gunnar, now we have another true oldie back into the party, you know, trusty right-hand man of Soral. I am back, damn right I am. Edeus is incinerated and is replaced by Erenborg. They both have long ears, so it's hard to tell the difference. Varen tragically leaves the party and is replaced by Sir Otto. Soral hates Sir Otto. And so, as of the time of this video, this is now the current party. We have Sir Otto, we have Brock the Grudgefoot, we have Anya the Ice Witch, Gunnar the Undying, we have Soral the main character, we have Hamhunch the Hex Chef, Teftria the Human Ambulance, and Erenborg the something something. And now I am finally done, okay? Thank you all for watching. I hope you've enjoyed, and hopefully these characters will actually survive long enough to make it to the Generation 5 batch of these, assuming Face Customizer comes out this year and everything else, you know. Time will tell. Anyway, links are in the description below if you want them. Also, if you like this absolute abomination of a video project, then please press like. If you didn't, by all means press dislike, that's fine too. I will see you all next time. Goodbye!